floating floor won't allow you to walk across the top of your swimming pool, but it will give your tiled floor a new lease of life. Hello and welcome, I'm Ed Friendo, and today I'll show you everything you need to know about laying a floating floor. Well, as you can see, floating floors come in a wide range of thicknesses, finishes and patterns, which include solid bamboo, veneer and solid timber. Well, out of this lot, I'm sure you'll find one that suits your style and your budget. Preparation is 9/10 of the law when it comes to floating floors. Just because you don't see it, don't think for 1 minute that you don't have to worry about it. Poor preparation now will only lead to boards delaminating and popping up all over the place, and that will lead to tears later on. The first thing you need to check is the subfloor. If it's carpet, that will need to be removed, but if it's vinyl or tiles and they are in a sound condition, the floor can be laid directly over the top. If it's a concrete floor like this one, make sure it's dry and nice and level. There are a couple of ways to test for moisture content in your concrete slab. If it's an old slab, you might have to use a waterproof compound. You can use an expensive meter, or as we've done, just cut a 600mm square of plastic, tape it to the concrete and leave it for 24 hours. After that period of time, you peel it off and check for any moisture under the plastic. If your hollows are any deeper than 3mm, you'll need to fill those with a self-leveling compound. Where the high spots and hollows are, just mark them with the pencil. And the high spots, you just need to grind them off. We found a low spot here on the floor in the back corner. We've mixed up some self-leveling compound. What we do then is pour it onto the slab, just push it around with a trowel. Remember, it's self-leveling, it'll find its own level. Handy hint, if you're going to lay your floating floor in the kitchen, make sure the cabinets are installed first. If you don't, the cabinet will stop the floor floating. And if you have anything wrong with your floor, could you imagine ripping the kitchen out as well? Before you buy any boards, you'll need to measure up your room. If you measure the length by the width, that'll give you the total. Our total here was 40 square metres, and in each one of these packs is 2.24 square metres. So if I divide those two dimensions, that'll equal 18 packs. Quite intelligent, aren't I? And just one more thing to remember, it's a good idea to buy one extra pack now, because later on you may not be able to match them if you need to replace some boards. Now the next step you need to do is to remove any skirtings. A good tip here is to cut along the top edge with a utility knife. That way it'll cut the paint and stop it from tearing. Now yours will be a little harder than that to take off, but the idea here is that when we lay our floating floor is to leave a clearance gap. That way, when we put the skirting back on, it'll cover that gap. Now the next step you need to do is to cut a clearance gap under the door jambs. The simplest way to do that is get an offcut of the underlay, put that down, and an offcut of the board. With your handsaw, hold the saw nice and flat on the top and you can cut the jamb. Take your time with this. A nice sharp handsaw will give you a nice smooth cut. Now that is a perfect fit. Handy hint, before we start laying the boards, you need to remove the doors. But before you do that, you need to make sure you've got enough clearance underneath. If you don't, now's the time to plane the bottom of the door. I don't need to tell you what I'm doing here. Just make sure you do a good job, because any grit or lumps under the plastic will just tear it when you walk on the floor, then it won't be waterproof.